My name is Isabella Ward, and the last thing I remember before the world went black was the taste of iron in my mouth and the sound of my mother's voice screaming my name. The marble floor beneath me was slick with my own blood, warm against my cheek. Above me, the chandelier swayed, scattering gold light across the crimson streaks. My stepfather, Travis Holt, stood frozen at the top of the staircase, his hand still half raised as if he couldn't believe what he had just done. She signed nothing, he muttered, his voice trembling with fury rather than regret. My mother. Diane rushed toward me, her silk robe dragging through the blood. Travis, stop! You've gone too far. But she didn't look at me. She looked at him. The man who had just sent me crashing down 12 steps of marble because I refused to sign away the penthouse my grandfather left to me. I tried to speak, but my throat burned, and all that came out was a faint, wet gasp. I could smell the lemon polish from the stairs, the perfume on my mother's wrist, and something else fear. Not mine. Hers. The room spun. I heard her voice break through the chaos, whispering to Travis. She's bleeding too much. Call someone. Please. His reply was a hiss. No hospitals. Not yet. But the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Someone, a neighbor maybe, must have called 911. The light began to fade at the edges of my vision, the chandelier turning into a halo of fractured light. A paramedic's voice cut through. Ma'am, step aside. Hands lifted me firm and efficient, their touch grounding me just enough to keep me from slipping away completely. I opened my eyes in the ambulance, trying to form words, trying to say. He pushed me. The paramedic leaned close. What happened? Miss. My lips moved, but my mother's face appeared behind him at the door, pale, trembling. She said softly, It was an accident. She fell down the stairs. Her voice carried authority, sorrow, and the kind of polished control that made people believe her. The paramedic hesitated, looking from her to me. Is that true? He asked. I wanted to scream no. I wanted to tell him that my mother was lying, that the man she defended had tried to kill me. But then she reached out her fingers, brushing mine. Sweetheart, don't talk now. Save your strength. I saw the tears in her eyes, but they weren't for me. They were for the image she had to protect. The siren's wail filled the silence between us. I turned my head away, staring out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. That was the night I learned that silence can be deadlier than any fall. I grew up believing that silence was love. My mother, Diane Ward, taught me that when I was 8 after my father's funeral. She held my face in her manicured hands and whispered, We don't cry in public, Isabella. People respect strength, not noise. From that moment, I learned to swallow pain like medicine. When Travis Holt came into our lives 2 years later, I was too young to see what kind of man he really was. Everyone said he was charming, successful, and the kind of man my mother deserved after years of widowhood. He wore expensive suits, drove imported cars, and knew everyone worth knowing in Seattle. My mother's smile returned when he was around. I wanted to believe he was saving us. My grandfather, Henry Ward, didn't trust him. I still remember their first argument at the dining table, the way Grandpa's fork clattered against his plate. A man who talks this much about managing wealth usually doesn't have any, he said flatly. Travis's grin never faltered. Henry, with all due respect, money only matters if you know how to make it grow. My mother laughed nervously, trying to smooth the tension. Travis just wants to help. But Grandpa wasn't the kind of man who needed help. He was old Seattle money, disciplined and sharp, even in his 70s. I loved spending time in his penthouse overlooking Beacon Hill, its wide terrace, the marble staircase, the walls lined with art he'd collected over decades. He said it would all be mine one day. You've got an eye for beauty, Isabella, he told me once as we watched the sunset stain the glass. This house suits you. You understand quiet elegance. I didn't realize then that those words would become the target painted on my back. When Grandpa died unexpectedly, Travis stepped in as if he were the family patriarch. At the funeral, he shook hands with every guest like a politician. I caught him checking his watch during the eulogy. A week later, the reading of the will took place. My mother, dressed in black silk, clutched Travis's arm while the lawyer read aloud. To my granddaughter, Isabella Ward. I leave my residence at Beacon Hill and all its contents to be held in her name solely. Travis's smile flickered. My mother's hand tightened around his arm. I didn't notice then, but something changed in her eyes, a mix of confusion, envy, and fear. After the funeral, Travis congratulated me. "That's quite an inheritance, kiddo. A bit too much for one person to handle, don't you think?" I thought he was joking. "It's just a home," I said. "Grandpa wanted me to have it." He chuckled, poured himself a drink, and murmured, "Homes can be traded, Isabella. Everything can." Over the next year, his tone toward me shifted. He began calling me selfish, immature, ungrateful. My mother, caught in his gravity, repeated his words until they sounded like truth. "He only wants what's best for you," she'd insist whenever I tried to set boundaries. I moved out after one particularly ugly fight. Travis had accused me of hoarding family wealth. My mother stood by silently as he slammed the door behind me. I promised myself I'd never go back. But grief has a way of binding you to people who broke you. So when she called me 3 years later, her voice trembling, saying she was sick and needed both her daughters close, I packed my bags without thinking. I thought time might have softened things. I thought love might still exist under the bruises of the past. I was wrong. When I stepped back into that house, the house that once felt like heaven, I felt the air shift. The marble gleamed as always, but the warmth was gone. Travis greeted me with that same perfect smile, the one I now knew hid something darker. "Welcome home, Bella," he said, his tone slow, deliberate. My mother stood behind him, her hands clasped like a nervous schoolgirl. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't coming home. I was walking back into a cage built from silence and marble. The first night back at the Beacon Hill Penthouse felt wrong in ways I couldn't name. The place looked the same, the glinting marble staircase, the polished silver frames, the faint scent of jasmine my mother always burned in the evenings, but it was colder, quieter. The silence had weight now, like the house itself was holding its breath. Travis poured wine for my mother and said smoothly, "We should talk about logistics now that Isabella's here." His tone wasn't welcoming, it was managerial. My mother nodded, her fingers trembling as she lifted her glass. "Of course. It'll be good to have her help." I frowned. "Help with what?" Travis smiled thinly. "Keeping things organized. You know how complicated maintenance can be. Taxes, insurance, appraisals." He paused, watching me closely. "Henry's place needs a strong hand." I set my bag down slowly. "It's my home, Travis. Not a project." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "No one's questioning that, Bella. But sometimes it takes experience to protect an asset properly." He emphasized the word asset like it tasted expensive. I noticed how my mother avoided my gaze, staring into her wine. Later that night, as I unpacked, I found that the guest room, my old room, had been rearranged. The drawers were empty, but the walls felt watched. I turned toward the corner and noticed a small red light blinking behind a decorative vase. A camera. My stomach dropped. I unplugged it, stuffed it into my suitcase, and told myself I'd deal with it in the morning. But when I mentioned it at breakfast, Travis didn't even blink. "Security measure," he said. "You should be grateful I care enough to keep you safe." My mother reached over and touched my hand gently. "He's just being cautious, sweetheart." Cautious. That was her favorite word whenever he crossed the line. That afternoon, he came to find me in the library where Grandpa's books still lined the shelves. He leaned against the doorframe, pretending casual conversation. "You're still planning to keep working from here?" "Yes," I said. "I can work remotely." He nodded, looking around. "You know people lose perspective when they live off inherited money. They start thinking independence means isolation." I closed my laptop. "I pay my own bills. I work for everything I have." He smiled, but his eyes hardened, including that penthouse. The air between us froze. I said carefully, "Grandpa gave it to me because he trusted me. He didn't trust you." That was the first time I saw the shadow behind Travis's composure. His jaw tightened, his hands curling slightly at his sides before he smoothed them over his shirt. "You should be careful what you say, Isabella. Misunderstandings can ruin families." He left the room, his cologne lingering like smoke. I stared after him, shaking. That night, I overheard whispers from my mother's room. Her voice, low, pleading. "Please, Travis, don't pressure her. She's sensitive." His reply was ice. "Sensitive doesn't pay property taxes." I should have left then, but guilt kept me there, the same guilt my mother had built into me since childhood. When she brought me tea the next morning, her eyes were red. "You know how much he's done for us," she said softly. "He's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to own me," I said. She flinched, then smiled sadly. "You've always been dramatic." I watched her walk away, and for the first time I noticed the bruises on her wrist faint under the sleeve of her blouse. Something twisted inside me. She wasn't just trapped, she was his prisoner too, even if she'd convinced herself otherwise. That night, as the city lights flickered beyond the glass, I stood by the balcony and realized what Grandpa had meant when he once warned me people who need to control others fear losing themselves. Travis was losing his grip, and that made him dangerous. Over the next few days, the house became a theater where every scene was designed to make me doubt myself. Travis was the director, my mother, the reluctant actress, and I, the audience trapped in the front row. He controlled the lights, the sound, even the pauses between words. "You've changed, Bella," he said one morning over breakfast, buttering his toast with surgical precision. "You used to be so polite. Now you're confrontational." My mother glanced at me nervously. "He just means you've been distant." I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just adjusting." "Adjusting?" He echoed his tone, dripping with mock concern. "You've been hostile since you got here." "We're family. Family should trust each other." I looked up from my coffee. Trust goes both ways. His expression didn't flicker, but his eyes turned cold, sharp as glass. "Of course," he said lightly, but the word carried a warning. That day, I found my laptop missing. When I confronted him, he laughed. "It was on the kitchen counter." "Maybe you misplaced it." "You mean where you were standing," I shot back. He smiled. "You're tired, Isabella. People make mistakes when they're under stress. Gaslighting, textbook." I could almost hear Grandpa's voice from memory. The cruelest manipulation isn't in what they take, it's in what they make you question. Each night, Travis turned the thermostat low enough to make me shiver. Each morning, he criticized my tone, my clothes, the way I breathed. My mother echoed him softly, as if reading from a script. "Don't provoke him, dear." Then came the legal pressure. One afternoon, Travis appeared in my room with a thick folder. "These are updated property documents," he said smoothly. "We need your signature for some tax revisions." I scanned the first page, transfer of ownership. "This isn't a revision," I said coldly. "It's a sale." "It's a consolidation," he corrected. "You'll still be part of it?" "Part of it? Or out of it." "Don't twist my words," he said, voice tightening. "Your grandfather left this family divided. I'm trying to fix that." My mother entered the room, wringing her hands. "Bella, he's only trying to help. Please don't make this difficult." "Make what difficult?" I asked. "Signing my name over so you can both cash in on his death." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, guilt crossed her face. Real human guilt. But then she looked at Travis, and the emotion vanished. "You're being cruel," she whispered. "We've given you everything." I laughed softly. "Everything? You mean permission to breathe under your rules?" Travis's smile vanished. He took a slow step toward me. "You've been ungrateful for years. That ends now." He dropped the folder on my desk and leaned close enough for me to smell the whiskey on his breath. "You'll sign this by Friday, and if I don't..." His smile returned tighter. "Then we'll find another way." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the balcony listening to the hum of the city below, thinking about how quickly love can rot into fear. My mother came in quietly, a glass of milk in her hand, like she used to bring me when I was a child. "Travis is under a lot of pressure," she said. "He's not himself." "Then maybe he should see a doctor," I murmured. "He's not the one who needs help," she said softly. The words landed like stones. I watched her leave her silk robe gliding through the hallway light. I picked up my phone and typed a message to May Collins' grandpa's old lawyer. "Need to review property papers urgently. Confidential." Then I took photos of the documents page by page, my hands trembling. As I hit send, the sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor. Travis's voice floated through the half-open door. "Can't sleep." I froze the phone still in my hand. "Just reading," I said. "Good," he replied, his tone smooth as ice. It's important to understand what you're signing." The door closed quietly, but his presence lingered like smoke long after he was gone. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just trying to take my home, he was trying to erase me from it. The next morning, I went to the attic, a place Travis rarely entered. Dust floated in golden ribbons through the sunlight from the small circular window. It smelled like cedar ink and thyme. I ran my fingers along the shelves until I found the old wooden chest my grandfather used to keep beneath the portrait of my grandmother. Inside were the things no one else valued anymore: yellowed sketches, worn photo albums, a broken watch. But underneath it all, wrapped in wax paper, was a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter written in my grandfather's strong, deliberate handwriting. The paper was rough, but the words hit like thunder. "My dearest Isabella, if you are reading this, I am gone. I trust you will inherit this home and all that comes with it. But understand, this walls and marble mean nothing if the people inside them lose their integrity. You will face charm that conceals greed. You will face love that demands silence. When that day comes, remember you owe them nothing but truth. Freedom is worth more than marble and gold." I sat there staring at the letter until the sunlight shifted. Underneath it, taped to the page, was a small black USB drive. My heart quickened. I plugged it into my laptop. The first file opened with a click, an old recording. I heard my grandfather's voice, then Travis's. "You're too generous, Henry," Travis was saying, his tone friendly but slick. "You could put the property in a family trust, let me manage it." My grandfather's reply was curt. "You think I'd hand over my home to a man who treats my daughter like a trophy and my granddaughter like a distraction? No, Travis, you'll never own what isn't yours." The recording ended abruptly. My pulse thundered in my ears. My grandfather had known all along what kind of man Travis was, and he'd left this as a weapon. I sat there clutching the letter, feeling both grief and power roll through me like a tide. For the first time in years, I didn't feel helpless. I felt seen, protected. That evening, I printed the letter, made 3 copies, and locked the USB in my suitcase. I took a photo of both and emailed them to May Collins with a single message: insurance. When I went downstairs, Travis and my mother were in the living room. She looked tense, wringing her hands while he smiled at me with that too polite expression that always meant danger. "Bella," he said, "your mother and I have been thinking. Maybe we rushed you. We can talk about this calmly." I met his gaze, calm for once. "You're right. We should talk, but I'd like my lawyer present." His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he recovered. "No need for that. We're family." "Exactly," I said, "and families should trust each other, right?" The air tightened. My mother's eyes darted between us. "Bella, don't do this." "Do what I asked," softly. "Tell the truth." Travis set down his drink a little too hard. "Be careful, Isabella." "I am," I said quietly. Finally. As I turned to leave, I could feel his stare burning into my back. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I had something stronger than fear now. I had proof. The night of the dinner felt like a scene choreographed by Travis himself. Everything gleamed too much: the silverware, the crystal glasses, even my mother's diamonds catching the chandelier light. The penthouse smelled of roasted duck and tension. Travis had insisted on hosting a family dinner to clear the air. My mother dressed like it was a gala in emerald satin that clung to her shoulders. She kept saying, "Let's make tonight peaceful, please," as if peace were something that could be negotiated. When the first guests arrived, I realized this wasn't a family dinner. It was a performance. Among them were Travis's business associates, a real estate broker I vaguely recognized, and a middle-aged attorney who greeted me like he already knew I was the problem. Travis moved through them like a politician pouring drinks, laughing too loudly. Every time he said my name, it sounded rehearsed. "My stepdaughter, Isabella," he announced as I walked in. "The young lady of the house. We're finalizing a few legal matters tonight. She's being very gracious about it." My stomach clenched. I forced a smile, but my voice was steady. "I haven't agreed to anything yet." The broker chuckled, misunderstanding the chill in my tone. "Well, with property like this, you'd be smart to cash out while the market's hot." Travis raised his glass. "Exactly my point. My mother's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent plea. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Let's just enjoy dinner." I stared down at my plate. Every sound, the scrape of forks, the pour of wine, felt like it was echoing off my skull. Halfway through the meal, Travis stood and clinked his glass. Everyone a toast to new beginnings, to family unity, and to making smart decisions. He lifted his glass toward me. "Isabella, I know you've been hesitant, but it's time to move forward. It's what your grandfather would have wanted." I looked up slowly. "Would he?" I said quietly, "because I found a letter from him that says the opposite." The room froze. My mother's breath caught. Travis blinked once, his smile flickering. "A letter?" "Yes," I said. My voice steady now. He left it in the attic, with a recording. The lawyer across the table shifted uncomfortably. Travis laughed, the sound brittle. "You must be mistaken. Henry was a sentimental man. He said all kinds of nonsense in his old age." "He was many things," I said, "but he wasn't stupid." The silence was sharp enough to cut. Travis set his glass down. "You're being dramatic again, Bella. I invited people here to celebrate peace, and you want to pick a fight." "You invited them to pressure me into signing," I said. "Let's not pretend this is about family." My mother's hand trembled around her napkin. "Please, Bella, don't do this here." I turned to her. "You keep saying that like I'm the one ruining things. He's the one trying to erase Grandpa's name from the deed." Travis's tone turned dark. "Enough." "No," I said firmly. "I'm done staying quiet." The guests looked between us, unease creeping across their faces. My mother stood abruptly, forcing a laugh. "Let's take a short break, shall we?" She gestured toward the kitchen, her face pale. Travis followed me into the hallway, voice low. "Dangerous. You really don't know when to stop, do you?" "You should have thought of that before you underestimated me," I said. He leaned close, the smile gone completely now. "You'll regret crossing me?" "Maybe," I said softly, "but not as much as you'll regret what's coming." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned on his heel and went back to the table, calling out cheerfully, "Just a little family disagreement. Nothing serious." The laughter from the dining room sounded forced, brittle. I walked upstairs to my room, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. May had texted received files. "Don't sign anything. I'm preparing an injunction." I exhaled shakily. Downstairs, I heard the clinking of glasses again, the laughter rising. It was the laughter of people who thought the world was already theirs. I went to the balcony and looked out over the city lights, the cold wind lifting my hair. "Freedom is worth more than marble and gold," Grandpa had written. I finally understood what he meant. That night, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing the house. I was afraid of losing myself. And I wasn't going to let that happen. The morning after this dinner, the penthouse was quiet, almost too quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. The smell of wine and burnt candle wax lingered in the air. My mother sat at the breakfast table, her eyes red and puffy, a tissue clutched in her hand. She didn't look at me when I walked in. "You embarrassed him," she said softly. "You embarrassed all of us." "I told the truth," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "You humiliated your stepfather in front of his colleagues," she continued, her tone rising with each word. "Do you have any idea what that did to him?" I turned, meeting her gaze. "He tried to steal my inheritance. Mom, he doesn't deserve sympathy." She slammed her hand on the table, the sound sharp and desperate. "He's done everything for us. Everything your father couldn't, including pushing me down a staircase someday." The words escaped before I could stop them. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For a moment, I saw something fear, maybe even guilt, flash in her eyes. But then it vanished, replaced by cold resolve. "You've always been dramatic, Isabella. Just like your grandfather said." "He never said that," I whispered. "He pitied you," she snapped. "You were always his little charity project." The insult hit harder than any slap could. I took a slow breath and set my cup down. "You're wrong. He saw you both for what you are. That's why he left the penthouse to me." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the marble floor. "You ungrateful child. After all we've given you." "You gave me silence," I cut in. You taught me to bury the truth to protect men like him." Her hand shook as she pointed toward the door. "Get out of my sight before you ruin this family completely." I nodded slowly. "Fine. But remember, this family's built on lies were ruined long before the truth ever arrived." As I turned to leave, Travis appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. His suit pressed his tie. Perfect. "Leaving so soon?" he asked. "For good," I said. He smiled faintly, but there was venom beneath it. "You'll be back. People like you always come back." "Not this time," I said. "And if you come near me again, I'll make sure everyone sees what you really are." The air between us thickened electric. He took one step closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Be careful, Isabella. You don't know how fragile you are." I didn't flinch. "Neither do you." I brushed past him, the scent of his cologne turning my stomach. My heart pounded as I left the penthouse, the elevator doors closing behind me with a cold metallic thud. For a fleeting moment, I thought it was over. I didn't know then that walking away wouldn't save me, that some people don't let you leave quietly. By the end of that week, Travis would make good on his threat. And I would learn that his idea of family unity came with blood on marble. It was raining the night I went back. A hard silver rain that blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and white. I hadn't planned to return. God knows I wanted distance, but my laptop was still in the study, and it held everything. My work files, my correspondence with May, the copies of Grandpa's letter. When I texted my mother that I'd stop by quickly while Travis was out, she replied with a single word. "Okay, no punctuation, no warmth, just that." When I arrived, the house was dark except for the low amber glow spilling from the living room. I called out Mom. No answer. Only the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The marble gleamed under the chandelier-wet footprints from the rain trailing behind me. I took a step toward the study and froze. Travis stood by the bar swirling a glass of scotch, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" he said, voice smooth and poisonous. My pulse spiked. "Where's Mom resting?" he said. "You really hurt her, you know. She's been crying all week. You should apologize." I clenched my fists. "Apologize for what? Refusing to let you steal from me." His smile vanished. He set the glass down carefully like he was trying not to break it. "You don't understand how this works, Isabella. I built this family. I kept your mother safe. I kept you safe. You kept us quiet," I said, my voice shaking. "There's a difference." He took a step toward me, his eyes dark. "You think you can destroy me with your little recordings. You think anyone will believe a spoiled girl over me." I backed up until my shoulder hit the stair rail. "It's not about belief anymore. It's about evidence." His gaze flickered, a spark of panic crossing his face before it hardened into rage. "You always were your grandfather's pet, self-righteous and ungrateful. He saw through you," I said. "He knew you'd try to take everything." The words landed like a slap. His jaw tightened. Then without warning, he lunged forward, grabbing my arm. The suddenness of it stole my breath. "You think you're better than me," he snarled. "You're nothing without this house." I twisted, trying to break free. "Let go. You'll sign the deed tonight," he hissed, dragging me toward the table. I shoved him hard. The sound of glass shattering exploded through the room as his drink hit the floor. He grabbed me again, rougher this time, his hand locking around my wrist. "Enough, you're drunk!" I gasped. "I'm right," he growled. The next moment was chaos. My heel caught on the edge of the rug as he yanked me backward. My balance slipped. I reached for the banister, but his grip didn't loosen. His hand pushed maybe out of anger, maybe out of instinct. My foot missed the step. The world tilted. Pain shot through me as my head collided with the marble edge. For a heartbeat, I saw nothing but white light blinding sharp and then blackness edged in red. My body hit the floor with a sound I felt more than heard. Somewhere above, my mother screamed, "Travis!" She fell, he shouted. She slipped. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. My ears filled with the rush of my own blood. Everything smelled of whiskey and rain. My mother's face appeared above me, blurred and trembling. "Oh my God! Bella, please, please, open your eyes." I wanted to. I really did. but everything felt distant, like I was sinking under dark water. Travis's voice came from far away. "Call 911 and—" My mother cried. "No," he snapped. "Not yet. She's bleeding." "She'll wake up." I heard a crash. A lamp, maybe, then silence. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the reflection of the chandelier shimmering in the pool of blood spreading beneath me. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the ambulance, the siren wailing above. My head throbbed. A paramedic leaned over me. "Miss, can you hear me?" "What happened?" My lips moved, but the only word that came out was pushed. My mother appeared beside him, mascara streaking her cheeks. "She fell," she said, her voice trembling. "She slipped down the stairs." The paramedic looked at me uncertain. "Is that true?" I stared at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Ma'am, are you sure?" he pressed. She nodded. "Yes. Please just help her." I felt the weight of her lie press down heavier than the blood on my skin. As the doors shut and the siren rose, I understood what Grandpa had meant. Love that demands silence isn't love, it's control. And I was done being controlled. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sleeplessness. The white light above my bed hummed faintly, burning against my eyelids each time I tried to rest. My head was wrapped in gauze, the world muffled through the steady beep of a monitor. I woke to the sound of my mother's voice before I saw her face. "You're lucky to be alive," she whispered, brushing hair from my forehead. "You took a terrible fall." I stared at her. "You mean when Travis pushed me?" Her hand froze. "Don't say that. It's the truth." Her eyes darted to the open door, then back to me, wide and pleading. "Isabella, please. The police are here. They think it was an accident. Don't make this worse." "Worse for who?" I asked softly. "Me or him?" Before she could answer, a nurse stepped in, followed by a police officer in uniform. "Miss Ward," the officer said gently, "I just have a few questions." "Can you tell me what happened?" My mother straightened, voice calm, rehearsed. She slipped. "The floors in the penthouse can be dangerous when wet. I've told Travis we should replace the marble." The officer nodded, but looked at me instead. "And you?" "Miss Ward, is that what happened?" My mouth felt dry, my throat tight. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that I'd felt his hands on me, that this wasn't the first time he'd crossed a line. But my mother's eyes, terrified, desperate, locked on mine. She was silently begging. "Yes," I said. Finally, my voice barely a whisper. "It was an accident." The officer scribbled notes, thanked us, and left. The door shut softly behind him. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. My mother exhaled shakily. "You did the right thing," she murmured. I turned away. "For who, him or your reputation?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "You don't understand, Bella. He can ruin us. He already did." She stood abruptly, clutching her purse like a shield. "You rest. I'll handle everything." When she left, I felt the air change, cooler, cleaner, freer. The nurse returned to check my vitals, her movements efficient, quiet. But as she leaned closer, she slipped a small card into my hand. On it, in neat writing, were 5 words. "When you're ready, tell truth." On the back was a name, Dr. Alvarez. That night, as the hospital dimmed and the halls emptied, I lay awake, replaying every second of the fall, the sound of a glass breaking my mother's scream, Travis's voice saying, "She slipped." The world expected me to stay quiet again, just as I had all my life, but I felt something shift inside me. A slow, steady anger, not the kind that burned and faded, but the kind that stayed measured, waiting cold. When the nurse came back to adjust my IV, she looked at me knowingly. "You're safe here," she whispered, "but you need to be smart. People like him don't stop until they're exposed." I nodded weakly. After she left, I reached under my blanket and pulled out the folded card. I stared at the name until it blurred through my tears. "When you're ready," it said. I wasn't ready yet, but I would be. Because someday soon, Travis Holt was going to learn what it felt like when truth stops whispering and starts screaming. A week after I left the hospital, I returned to the penthouse. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. My laptop was still there, and May, my lawyer, had called to say she needed me to retrieve a few signed papers. I waited until I knew Travis would be gone. He was attending a corporate meeting in Bellevue, according to my mother. She sounded calm on the phone, almost too calm. Her voice wrapped in that same old silk of denial. "He's been remorseful," she said. "He wants to apologize." I hung up before she could say more. The penthouse was spotless when I walked in, as if the blood that had once stained the marble had been scrubbed out of existence. The air smelled of bleach and lilac candles. Every surface gleamed, but the perfection made it worse, like a crime scene too carefully cleaned. I walked toward the study, my pulse thrumming. My laptop sat neatly on the desk. Beside it, an envelope addressed to Isabella. Inside were the same property documents Travis had shown me before, only this time my signature was already printed at the bottom in perfect cursive. My stomach twisted. I knew that signature. It was forged down to the last flourish. I pulled out my phone, snapped photos of each page, and sent them to May. Within seconds, she replied, "That's fraud. Don't touch anything else. I'll handle this." I should have left right then, but I hesitated. Something inside me, some sharp, quiet instinct, told me to check the office phone. Travis was careless in small ways. He always thought himself untouchable. I pressed the last calls button. The screen flashed with several outgoing numbers and one labeled Realty Group. My breath caught. He was already negotiating the sale. As I scrolled, a sound from the hallway made me freeze. The elevator doors opened. Bella Travis's voice echoed. My pulse jumped. I slipped the phone into my pocket. He walked in, jacket slung over one arm, his face too composed. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said evenly. "Checking up on things." "Just getting my laptop," I replied. He smiled faintly. "I see. And the papers." "You mean the ones you forged," I said. His eyes flicked toward the desk, then back to me. "Careful what you accuse people of. Words have consequences. So do crimes I shot back." He took a step closer, his voice soft, measured. "You don't have proof." I let that hang in the air for a moment, then said quietly, "I do." His brow furrowed. I tapped my phone, pretending to check a message, but instead, I hit record. "You really shouldn't underestimate me, Travis," I said. "May has everything: emails, documents, even that little phone call you made to the realty firm. It's over." He stared at me for a long beat and then laughed a dry, bitter sound. "You think anyone will believe a broken girl over me? You can't even tell the truth to your own mother." "Watch me," I said. For a second, the mask slipped. The arrogance cracked, revealing something raw and ugly underneath. "You don't understand, Isabella," he hissed. "If I go down, I'll take your mother with me." "You already have," I said softly. He froze. I lifted my phone slightly, the screen still glowing red from the recording app. His eyes widened. "Get out," he said quietly. "Gladly." I turned and walked toward the elevator. My hands trembled so violently that I nearly dropped the phone. When the doors closed, I leaned against the cool metal wall and exhaled shakily. I played back the recording, the sound of his voice admitting everything. It wasn't long, but it was enough. That night, I sent the file to May with the subject line, "Truth Awakens." She called within minutes. "Isabella," she said, her voice low but fierce, "this is it. You've just ended him." For the first time in months, I let myself smile. It wasn't joy, it was justice waking up. And justice once awake doesn't sleep again. 6 weeks later, the courtroom was packed. The air buzzed with the low murmur of reporters, attorneys, and onlookers who'd come to witness the trial that had turned into a local sensation, Holt v. State of Washington. The man once hailed as a respected businessman now sat in a gray suit, hands folded neatly on the table, his wedding band conspicuously missing. Travis kept his head high, but every so often his jaw clenched, a flicker of fear breaking through the polished facade. I sat across from him at the witness table, my palms pressed flat against the wood. My lawyer, May Collins, leaned in. "You ready?" she whispered. I nodded, though my stomach felt like a fist tightening inside me. The judge, an older woman with eyes that missed nothing, adjusted her glasses. "We'll resume with the prosecution's evidence," she said. The prosecutor rose. Your Honor, we'd like to submit Exhibit C, an audio recording captured by the victim, Ms. Isabella Ward, on the evening of September 17th. Travis's head snapped toward me, his composure cracking. That was taken without my consent. Mr. Holt, the judge, interrupted, her tone sharp. You will remain silent. The prosecutor pressed play. The courtroom filled with Travis's voice, cold and venomous. If I go down, I'll take your mother with me. Then my voice followed steady and clear. You already have. The sound hung in the air like a blade. You could hear the collective intake of breath from the gallery. My mother, seated behind the defense table, covered her mouth with shaking hands. The prosecutor turned to the jury. This recording corroborates the victim's statement and the physical evidence gathered from the scene. Mr. Holt's fingerprints were found on the railing, consistent with a push, not a fall. Travis shifted his fingers, tapping against the table. His lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him down. Continue, she said. May stood next, graceful and deliberate. Your Honor, we'd also like to submit Exhibit D, the signed property documents recovered from the defendant's desk. The signature was confirmed by forensic analysts to be forged. Another murmur rippled through the room. May walked to the evidence board and pinned up the photo of my grandfather's letter, the one Travis had never known existed. For years, she said, her voice steady, the defendant manipulated his wife and stepdaughter using psychological control and coercion to gain access to assets he had no legal right to. When Ms. Ward refused to comply, he resorted to violence. She turned toward the jury. This isn't a case about greed. It's about power, the kind that thrives in silence. But Ms. Ward refused to be silent. My throat tightened as May nodded toward me. Would you like to say something, Isabella? The judge gestured for me to approach. I stood, legs trembling, but steadying with each step. The courtroom blurred for a moment, the polished wood, the flash of camera lights, the weight of dozens of eyes, but when I spoke, my voice was calm. My grandfather taught me that freedom means nothing if it's built on fear, I said. For years, I believed silence would protect my family. It didn't. It only protected the person hurting us. I looked at Travis. He wouldn't meet my eyes now. The night he pushed me, I thought I was dying. But what terrified me more wasn't the pain, it was realizing that my mother would lie to save him, that she'd rather preserve the illusion of love than face the truth. My mother sobbed quietly behind him. I don't hate her, I continued softly. But I won't carry her silence anymore. The judge nodded. Thank you, Ms. Ward. Please take your seat. The defense tried to twist the story, claimed the push was accidental, that I'd slipped, that I was bitter over money, but the evidence was too heavy, the voices too clear. When the verdict came, the room went still. We, the jury, find the defendant Travis Holt guilty on all counts, aggravated assault fraud, and attempted property theft. My mother gasped. Travis stared straight ahead, his lips tightening, his knuckles white. The judge's voice was firm. Mr. Holt, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison. As the gavel struck, the sound reverberated through my bones like thunder. Travis turned once, his eyes full of a hatred that almost made me flinch. Almost. The bailiff led him away in handcuffs. My mother stood slowly, tears streaking her cheeks. She tried to approach me, but I stepped back. Bella, please, she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I looked at her. Really looked. The woman who had once seemed so elegant now looked small, cracked human. You could have told the truth, I said quietly. That's all you ever had to do. She reached for me, but I shook my head. Not now. Maybe not ever. When I walked out of the courtroom, the late afternoon sun hit me full in the face. For the first time in years, the warmth didn't feel like a lie. May caught up beside me, smiling softly. How do you feel? I exhaled. Like I can finally breathe. And as we stepped out into the light, I realized that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and that whisper can shake the world. The morning after the verdict, Seattle felt different. The sky was the same muted gray, the air still smelled faintly of salt and rain, but inside me, something had shifted. The city no longer felt like a cage, it felt like an ocean waiting for me to steer through it. For years, I had felt like I was drowning under someone else's tide. Now, for the first time, I could breathe without asking permission. I moved into my grandfather's penthouse that week, not as a symbol of wealth, but of survival. The same place that had been used to control me became my sanctuary. I replaced the heavy glass table with a wooden one, scarred but strong. I left the marble floors as they were, not because I loved them, but because they reminded me of what I had survived. The bruises on my ribs were fading, but the ones inside the silent ones took longer. Every morning, I made coffee and opened the balcony doors, letting the ocean air sweep through the rooms. The compass necklace rested on my collarbone, warm against my skin. Grandpa's words still echoed, "When the current tries to take you somewhere, you didn't choose steer anyway." I whispered back to him, "I'm steering Grandpa." I finally am. Therapy became my new ritual. Dr. Alvarez, the same name on the nurse's card, helped me piece together what survival had taken from me. Trauma rewires the brain, she told me once. But healing does too. Slowly, gently. I learned to sit in silence without fearing it. I learned that calm wasn't danger waiting, it was peace arriving. Sometimes I cried in her office without knowing why. Sometimes I laughed, startled by how strange it felt to make that sound again. One day she asked, "When did you realize you were free?" I thought for a long time before answering. When I stopped waiting for my mother to save me, I said, and saved myself instead. Weeks turned into months. Travis's name appeared in news articles and then faded from them, his empire collapsing under the weight of truth. My mother moved away quietly. I didn't hear from her, though I sometimes imagined her alone in some apartment far from the ocean, clutching memories like broken pearls. I no longer hated her. I just hoped she'd find her own compass one day. I spent evenings by the window writing letters I never sent to Grandpa, to the girl I used to be, to the version of me who thought love and obedience were the same thing. I told her that surviving wasn't weakness, that her silence had once protected her, but her voice would set her free. "You were never broken," I wrote. "You were building." On the anniversary of my 18th birthday, I lit a single candle in a cupcake just like the one Travis had thrown away. The flame flickered soft and steady. I didn't make a wish this time. I simply whispered, "I'm still here." The light reflected in the glass windows, multiplying until it looked like 100 tiny stars were burning back at me. A week later, I received a letter from the court confirmation that my trust and inheritance were now fully secured under my name, beyond dispute. I framed it not as victory, but as proof that truth endures even when buried under lies. May visited that evening, bringing Chinese takeout and 2 bottles of sparkling cider. "To freedom," she said, raising her glass. I smiled. "To women who stop apologizing for surviving." I started volunteering at a local women's shelter soon after. The first time I stood before a group of girls sharing their stories, my hands trembled. But when I began speaking about control, about silence, about learning to breathe again, the tremor vanished. "You are not what they did to you," I told them. "You're what you choose next." One of them, barely 16, whispered through tears, "How did you make them believe you?" I looked at her and said, "You don't make them believe you. You believe you. The rest comes later." As the seasons changed, so did I. I bought a sailboat, small, old, weathered like Grandpa's, and named it the Lighthouse. On the first morning out on the bay, the wind filled the sails and sunlight spilled across the water. I stood at the helm, hand on the wheel, the compass necklace glinting at my throat. The sea stretched endless and alive before me. I could almost hear his voice in the wind. "Keep your eyes forward, Isabella. The tide moves, the wind changes, people get loud. But if you know where you're steering, you don't need to fear the waves." I smiled through tears. "I know Grandpa," I whispered. "I'm not afraid anymore." That night back at the Penthouse, I wrote one final letter, this one to the woman I was becoming. "You have survived control, violence, betrayal, and silence. But you didn't just survive, you reclaimed the wheel. You turned the house of pain into a lighthouse. And now every woman who sees your light will know she can find her way too." I placed the letter inside the old leather pouch Grandpa once gave me and set it on the table. The city lights below shimmered like distant stars reflected in the bay. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. For the first time, peace didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like home.